It's that time again, the January Riley Blake Pillow of the Month. As you can tell, we're going to make a great big snowflake. Pretty easy, really not much new on this. Half square triangles like we've been doing for the past few months, but this time I was happy to see that they taught us how to do 8 at a time. So as you notice, I have a much larger square than I normally would to make a half square triangle. Have it out of the white and out of the navy blue fabric. You're marking your diagonal lines. You'll notice I sewed on those diagonal lines just like we normally do. But now that it's sewn, how do I turn it into 8 half square triangles? Very easy. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut in the center of it. So I'm going to make like a great big plus. So at 3 inches in, I'm going to divide them in half. Then I'm going to do 3 inches the other way. Yes, if I had put this on a rotating mat, it would have been easier, but I didn't think about that till just now. So now I have what we typically have, where we have 2 half square triangles together. And 2 more. So now I have 8. Just going to divide them like normal. And just like we always do, we're going to press to the dark, and then we're going to square them up. I think you've all gotten really good at this by now, I'm guessing, at how to square them up. You're probably using whatever is your favorite method, be it the block lock or the tucker trimmer or simply just a regular ruler. Remember, if you're using a regular ruler or even the tucker trimmer, you want to be sure that you have that diagonal line right where your seam line is, and then trim it to your 2.5 inches before you sew it on. So here are 2.5 inch half square triangles. What's another block that they had us do this time? Add a corner. But this time, a little bit different. Not only are we adding this square to a corner, but we're adding it to 2 corners. Very easy. We're just going to stitch right on that center line. So you can tell I'm just using some pins to mock up my stitch line. Then you're going to trim and cut over. But this is something I wanted to talk about with this block and with our flying geese. Have you ever noticed that sometimes when you go to flip that, maybe you don't have it perfectly covering the one that's behind it? Doesn't happen. I mean, it happens, but sometimes people really struggle with this. And they'll call me and they'll say, Chris, what do I do? I just can't get it right. Or they don't measure up correctly. Don't sweat the small stuff. If when you have this on here, and you, let me iron it just so it kind of imitates our seam here. We have it, it doesn't match up completely. What I suggest is leave your original square behind it, trim the middle piece out to reduce some bulk, and that way you still know where that seam should be when you go to match it up. Yes, you'll have 1 extra piece of fabric in there, but in the grand scheme of things, I would much rather have 1 extra piece of fabric, which would add just a tiny bit of bulk, versus not being able to get my blocks to line up correctly. Because if this block is shorter and I go and I add it to this block, my whole measurement's going to be off. So leave that original block behind it. And you can do that whenever you add a corner square And you can do the same thing when you add your flying geese. So here I've made the right side of my geese. You'll notice I trimmed it off because it matched well. I liked it. But again, if I sew this one and I'm just a little bit off, when you press that, leave one of your squares there so that you know exactly where that block should have measured to. And in this case, if I leave my blue block, you might say, but Chris, I can see blue behind it. After you sew your seam to your other block, then go back and cut that blue out of there. It's okay, but that way you won't see the blue shine through your pillow. Just some ways to fix mistakes that we commonly create when we're dealing with flying geese or corner squares. And the only thing I can tell you is practice, practice, practice. The other suggestion that I know I've told you probably for the past 10 months is when I go to sew on that diagonal line, I always try to sew closest to where my seam allowance is going to be. So this side is going to be my seam allowance because this is the side that I'm flipping up. So I'm going to sew on this line but to my seam allowance, because let's face it, our thread is thinner than the line that we can draw. So sew on the side of the line that is closest to your seam allowance. Only other suggestion I have when making this pillow is I made a mistake. I was just looking off of this pattern and I'm like, oh, I sew a corner square, a white one, onto my rectangular piece. No, it was actually supposed to be a separate half square triangle, so my piece became too short. How did I fix it? I just added a square of blue. No big deal. In the grand scheme of things, when you put it all together, you're never going to notice that. So enjoy. Don't stress the little things. You've probably improved all of your skills over the past 10 months, and hopefully you've been enjoying them. See you next month.